Joining us here in Washington, Ken Cuccinelli, Acting Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency in charge of determining who can immigrate to the U.S. legally. Great to have you here.
Good to be with you, Dana.
And it's good to see you again. So last Tuesday, the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, says we're going to forego the citizenship question on the census. And the next morning, the president says, not so fast, and he tweets this basically saying that was fake news. We are absolutely moving forward, as we must, because of the importance of the answer to this question. And then on Friday, he was asked about it again, and he said this.
You need it for Congress, for districting. You need it for appropriations. Where are the funds going? How many people are there? Are they citizens? Are they not citizens? You need it for many reasons.
So I have a question. Do you think that there will be a citizenship question on the 2020 census?
I do think so. I think the president has expressed determination. He's noted that the Supreme Court didn't say this can't be asked. They said that they didn't appreciate the process by which it came forward the first time. So the president is determined to fix that and to have it roll forward in the 2020 census.
Do you think, what do you think about people who say, well, it doesn't, the founding fathers said it's people, not citizens, that you have to count? And do you worry at all? I know you're obviously a lawyer for a long time. Constitutionally, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that if you look at what we've asked over the years, including, of course, the citizenship question, famously asked many, many times through our history, we ask a lot of other information as well. And in addition to just getting the raw number of souls in the country, we find out a lot of other information that's useful for governance.
When the president says you need it for Congress for redistricting, is that a legal concern? Because one of the questions has been, what was the motivation for wanting the question in the first place?
Well, and I think the answer is there are many reasons. He listed a few there, starting with the one you mentioned, but it isn't the only one. There are lots of reasons. For my agency, distribution of work can be considered.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think the citizenship question would help you in what you do at your new job?
Right now, we are redistributing our workload among our district offices and our regional offices to level that workload. And as it shifts around the country, we shift. And knowing where that work is coming from is helpful.
Let me ask you about the other thing. About 2 weeks ago, President Trump had referenced the possibility of some raids for people who are here illegally, so that our government would say, okay, guys, you got to go back. Right. That was called off, and he and the Speaker spoke. They said, let's try to get this supplemental money done. Right. That got done, but now the president is saying that they are expected soon. Now, I know that there are some groups that have been trying to help people who are here illegally to be able to not be found by
I think that's
our government.
Harboring, yes.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that. And can raids be successful if people know that they're coming?
Well, first of all, if people know that they're coming, that's a threat to officer safety. But realize there's about approximately a million people in this country who already have removal orders. They've been all the way through an extremely generous due process pipeline, had removal orders, they don't leave, that are still awaiting removal by ICE. And the president commented, I don't call these raids. I would agree with him. This is just what ICE is supposed to do. The fact that we've fallen to the point where we're talking about it like it's news tells you how far that we have fallen in the enforcement side. I mean, it is the most violated federal court order in America.
I know that they talked about possibly giving a fine to people who've overstayed their after the order, and it could go up to $500,000. I mean, I'm assuming that the Trump administration doesn't expect to ever see any of that money.
Well, we'd collect it from who we could, I'm sure, but for a lot of these folks, you know, they've been evading the law for so long, you'd expect them to evade that sort of collection as well.
When the Congress comes back this week, the House Democrats are going to have some hearings, and they want to focus this week on conditions at the border. Here is how the IG at Department of Homeland Security described it. I think we have a call for here. Basically, the children at 3 of the 5 Border Patrol facilities we visited had no access to showers. At these facilities, children had limited access to a change of clothes. Border Patrol had few spare clothes and no laundry facilities. But you went to see it for yourself.
Right.
And you talked about given the conditions, right? I think that we have that here as well. You said given the conditions and the circumstances, that the situation you thought was pretty good.
I do. I mean, recall that this is a pipeline. Border Patrol's at the front of the pipeline. You can't move people through the pipeline if the next stage of the pipeline is full, and ICE is the next stage of the pipeline, and their detention beds are not only full, they're over full. I went to one of their facilities at El Paso. It has about 950 people in a facility for 800. It was being run well, it was run safely, and so forth. But once you're over those capacity points, you encounter problems.
And what happens then? If they keep coming, we still have to take them?
If they keep coming, people in the House come down and complain about them keep coming while not helping fix the problem.
Right.
It's the height of hypocrisy.
Do you think that it's critical to get the asylum law changed in order to stop that flow?
It is.
And if that's the case, would you consider recommending that the administration try to have the asylum law changes attached to must-pass legislation coming up in September?
Absolutely. And I looked at the House calendar. Before they go to the beach in August and head off for their vacations, they have nothing except hearings on this subject. They just want to politicize it. They don't actually want to solve the problem. Dana, you mentioned a solution, which would be some basic changes, for instance, to asylum, to the credible fear standard, to stop the trafficking of children, things that we should all be able to agree on. And yet they're not going to consider that before they head out, and then undoubtedly will come back and complain more about the numbers at the border, because that's what's happening. You can complain about conditions. Conditions are driven by those numbers. So ultimately they're complaining about the numbers that they're attracting here.
And I just wondered, just tactically, I mean, because the administration, you are responsible for implementing the law and also taking care of the people that are there. So I sort of think that if there's legislation that has to be passed, like the debt ceiling, for example, attach that to then, do you think you could get Democratic support for that?
We could. I mean, that's a hard one to predict, because there's so many elements that go into any bill like that or any legislative strategy like that. But certainly, on the administration side, I can't imagine we'd ever take any of those options off the table.
You recently did you were at a citizenship ceremony.
Yes, several of them, actually.
And I'm just curious, when you see that, and it's very motivating.
It is. It's very
Tell me a little
moving
bit more about that.
Yeah, first of all, for people who haven't been to one, it's worth going to. It is a very moving experience every time. These are people who have gone through our legal process. They've been legally present here for a number of years, at least 5 years, and gone through the tests and the interview and so forth to become American citizens, and committed in probably the most extensive oath that anyone takes related to the federal government to their new country, and renouncing and abjuring all prior allegiance.
How many of those people per year is America letting in right now?
Well, last year we were in the range of 850,000, and that was the most in 5 years. And this fiscal year we will pass that. So, you know, people who come after the president and this administration say, oh, you know, you don't like immigrants. Well, we're letting more people become citizens than has happened in years. So
I don't think people realize that, indeed.
No, they don't.
I also wanted to ask you about this. So if we could pull up this tweet from Dr. Russell Moore. This is from about a couple weeks ago, and he tweeted this. He said, the reports of the conditions for migrant children at the border should shock all of our consciences. Those created in the image of God should be treated with dignity and compassion, especially those seeking refuge from violence back home. We can do better than this. Now, he took some criticism for that from like a Jerry Falwell Jr., but I know you're a man of deep faith, and for people who are at church on Sunday but thinking about these things, they want rule of law.
That's right.
But they also have this concern, especially about the children and how we're supposed to treat the meek.
That's right. And it's worth remembering that this massive influx of fraudulent asylum claims are swamping the people who truly fit that category, the people who are persecuted for political or religious reasons or other reasons. Those people are being swamped, and they're caught in a backlog caused by an enormous number of false claims. And those false claims are coming because the Congress refuses, especially the House, refuses to take the steps necessary to fix these loopholes that you can drive a truck through. And once someone is just in that clogged pipeline, they can get a work permit after 150 days. That's the attraction.
And in the meantime, we do have these children that have to be taken care of.
That's right. And I will say the supplemental did ease that pressure substantially. We went from about 2,500 kids who were in really in inappropriate facilities for children, not designed for that purpose, down to a fraction of that number. It's improved dramatically in the
they
last
can't take
month.
care of themselves, that's for sure.
Right. Well, in El Paso, I saw Border Patrol agents taking care of these kids in space not designed for children, and they were doing the best they could.
And they're doing the best, right. All right, Ken, thank you so much for being here. We
with you, Dana.
appreciate it.